Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we meet and work today. I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters, and culture. And kia ora to our audience from New Zealand today as well. If you are considering working with Médecins Sans Frontières, one of the biggest questions you probably have is, what is it actually like to go on assignment with MSF? So today we're going to explore that exact question by following the journey of an MSF assignment from receiving the very first call or email with the potential assignment, preparing to leave, arriving in your project, settling in, and also the return home. So we'll kick things off with a panel discussion and then we'll move into a Q&A. Thank you to everyone who sent through a question ahead of time. We had over 120 come in already, and we'll be weaving a few of these questions into the conversation this evening. You'll also have the chance to ask your own questions live in the chat as we go. So in today's discussion, we have the opportunity to hear from two people whose roles are very different, but whose work is equally essential to an MSF project. Joining us is Dr. Paul McClure, a specialist anaesthetist based in Adelaide. Alongside his work in Australia, Paul has completed multiple humanitarian assignments across Africa and the Pacific, including 3 assignments with MSF. Also joining us is Jessie Watson, an MSF finance and HR manager. Jessie completed her first assignment in South Sudan in 2017 and has since worked in Bangladesh, Yemen, Ukraine, and Gaza. Paul and Jessie, thank you so much for both being here this evening.
Pleasure.
Great. So both of you have now been on multiple assignments with MSF, but it would be great to go back to your very first one. So Jessie, do you remember receiving the call offering you an assignment? What was going through your mind?
Yeah, so it was a while ago now, but I remember that I was definitely really excited. I think it'd been about 10 months from when I first applied on the internet to, join MSF to when I actually got that offer coming through. In between then, obviously, there are the interviews in Australia, welcome days in Australia, and then some trainings on the HR and accounting systems in Paris. So I had a lot of time to think and imagine about which of the 70 countries I'd be placed in. So when that call came through offering me a place in South Sudan, I was pretty excited. I'd already quit my job once I got the offer to join the admin pool, and so I think it was about 2 weeks from when the offer came through. Just waited for the visa to get approved, and then I was off on the plane, ready to go. Yeah.
Wow, thanks, Jessie. So pretty quick, really. Yeah. And Paul, was it similar for you? How much notice did you get?
Yeah, I remember similar. Most of my the extensive onboarding process, I remember that, long days online, which was good. And I think from that time to when I was on the plane to South Sudan was about 2 months. MSF are really good about letting us know, or telling us to let them know how much time we need in lead-in in terms of our jobs and things from that. Equally, I was excited. I felt very privileged to be matched with an assignment, but also there was a degree, apprehension. And I think that was around the unknown, specifically my role being clinical. I knew I had a job to do, a specific job when I got there, and the unknown and the low resource environment did give me a little bit of apprehension, but I was all about the information at that time. There's guidelines, the guidelines were read. There's multiple briefings, all my questions, I had many questions, and that's what the briefings are for. So there's lots of time to gather as much information as you need from MSF itself. But also I draw on my colleagues who I work with, some that had first-hand experience of doing similar kind of work, but also just in a broader sense to let them know what I was doing, what I'm likely to expect, and take on those words of wisdom. So when I did get on the plane and when I landed in country, hopefully I could hit the ground running.
Great. Thanks so much, Paul. So once you accepted your first assignment, what happened next? Jessie, let's start with you.
I think, yeah, Paul mentioned that there's a lot of briefings. So like I said, it was about 2 weeks from when the offer came through to accepting to being on the plane. And in that time, things move really fast. So you get kind of a package of pre-departure docs with the project situation report, or SITREP. And that gives you kind of the most up-to-date weekly happenings of the project which you'd be on, the background, the security context, yeah, just lots of information on the work in the country, and then, yeah, pre-departure briefings through HQ in Paris and through Australia as well, just to make sure I had everything I needed, included my MSF t-shirt, and then, yeah, en route to the project.
Great, thanks. And yes, I'm glad you mentioned the t-shirt. It's very important. And Paul, for you as an anaesthetist, the duration of assignments is a lot shorter and very intense. How do you prepare for this?
Yeah, I think intensity is the right word, if we're being brutally honest, and that's why our assignments are shorter in duration. We've touched on the clinical preparation, absorbing those briefings, absorbing the clinical information. It's also important, I find, to prepare myself in terms of a well-being perspective. By nature, the MSF are there. We know there's going to be vulnerable people, majority mothers, children, populations that we're dealing with, and traumatic situations. So I kind of rationalize this in my mindset as like, it's an occupational hazard. This is what I'm going to expect. So therefore I can pre-prepare before going. With those briefings that we've mentioned, both Jessie and I, they are frank briefings. They're information, but they're also an opportunity for us to have those frank, open and honest communications. The people giving us the briefings, they want us to ask the questions. They want to give us the information, make sure that we feel that everything's been answered before we go. So there's no surprises. They can put our mind at ease. But that type of communication, I find, it doesn't just in those formal briefings with MSF. I'm also trying to have those conversations with my wider social network partners, loved ones, gives them an insight to what you may expect and you may be experiencing. So I find that really useful, just kind of like normalizes it in my mind. And also then if I am reaching out when I'm on assignment in country, they've got kind of an understanding of the sort of things that I've been going through and why I might be, wanting a quick chat or reaching out.
Great. Thanks, Paul. And you touched on a little bit there about assignment length, and this is something which I think our audience is interested in hearing more about. We did have a couple of questions come in on this topic. We had one from Anne-Marie who asks, what is the minimum time you can sign on for? So the typical assignment length for most profiles is anywhere between 6 to 12 months. What things did you consider, Jessie, as a part of your preparation, considering that you've been on assignment for these kind of longer periods?
Yeah, like definitely when you're away for 6, 9, 12 months, it really is, I approach it as a perspective of moving cities. So everything that you would do when you move cities, so pack up the flat. Obviously, like I said, I'd worked out my notice, so I was ready to go. And I think most important thing for me is just to prep family and friends, just to make sure that if you fall out of contact for a week, it might be because the generators aren't working or the cell phone coverage is down or there's no internet. And so it's just, building that expectation that if you don't hear from me for a week or a month, it's like, it's not a big deal, yeah, just sorting out all the life admin. So there's nothing worse than trying to do like bank payment and have two-factor authentication when you've got no internet. So just those little things that you can do that, take that worry off your mind.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think that's, all those little things perhaps we don't sometimes think about, but they definitely, it pays off to be prepared in advance. Thanks, Jessie. Now, so you finally arrive in the country of your assignment. Everything is very new and there is undoubtedly, I'm sure, some jet lag as well. What did those first few days or weeks look like for you, Jessie, once you'd arrived?
Yeah, I mean, the places that we or MSF works in are, the airports are often quite chaotic. So it's a really good feeling to see the MSF driver in his vest waiting, or her waiting to pick you up. So yeah, survive the airport pickup, and then usually it's to coordination at the capital of the city, and have briefings. Usually have like your first night to settle in, and I really try to get to bed at a good times to try and beat that jet lag. And then there's usually briefings, and then in my experience, it's 1 or 2 nights at coordination, and then you're off to the project.
Mm-hmm. So you've both now gone on several assignments with MSF. Paul, do you have any tips and tricks that you could share with our audience about how you got settled in quickly once you arrived?
Yeah, I would just echo with Jesse the chaotic airport scene, and the joy of arriving and my bag is actually with me, which is a great thing. But I think getting settled in is just leave the preconceived ideas at home. Flexible, accept the unpredictable. And probably the mantra or the top tip is in those first few days, listen more than you speak. That might be in the briefing, that might just be people who are on the ground, and that will really just allow you to really get an idea of what's going on there and then. So yeah, listen more than you can speak is what I would say.
Very valuable tip. Thanks, Paul. And something people often wonder about is food and accommodation. These are quite important things for people. So, Jessie, what has the food been like on assignment in the different contexts where you've been? Did you cook your own food? Was it cooked for you? How did you arrange that?
I mean, Paul probably agree with me, but the food can be a wee bit hit and miss. So it really depends on your project and the context that you're working in as to what's available in the market. But generally, there'll be a cook for the team, and the cook will usually work 6 days a week, and so the international staff will chip in to a food box. So everybody puts money into a food box, and the cook will go to the market. Like in Ukraine, they would go to the supermarket. In South Sudan, they'd just go to the local market. And yeah, what you get really depends on the availability. So in South Sudan, and wow, we had Chef Patrick, and he was awesome. We got fish and chicken and goat because we were close to a main city. Whereas when we went to a wheel paradise 6 hours north, they'd been on lentils for 3 months. So that's kind of the variability you can get in country. And then on your day off, usually you can cook as a team together. A lot of barbecues happening, or you can go out if security permits to local restaurants. Yeah.
Wonderful, thanks. It's very nice to hear too about those differences also between the different projects that you've been in. And Paul, how about accommodation? Did you have your own room? Were you sharing?
Yep. Accommodation wise, I've always had my own room. I suppose it's I don't think the word a perk is correct, but being one of the on-call staff, no one wants to share with the guy who might be getting up in the middle of the night and going to the hospital. I would describe the accommodation is basic but comfortable. There, as much as possible, there'll be a space where you've got your own space, be that your own room. And also within the whole guest house complex, there's socializing areas where you can have your meals or just socialize with the other people, both national and international staff that are there. One point I will just say on the food, as a medico, and any medicos listening, our timetable is very variable and meal times are normally set. So you have to be nice to the non-medicos because they're the ones that make sure there are food when you get back. So yeah, it's all about teamwork.
Got to do some networking for that as well.
Absolutely.
Great, thanks very much, Paul. And Jessie, as a finance and HR manager, how do you begin understanding how everything fits together? So what's really the first information that you want to know?
I guess from the finance point of view, the most important thing is to understand how we're going to fund the project, so where the cash will come from. Obviously, in the context that we work in, you know, it can be difficult to have enough liquidity. So you've got to have a good relationship with the bank manager, or maybe sometimes we have to get cash from coordination. But making sure you have an understanding of that cash flow is really important, so you can make sure that the logistic team has enough money to buy the supplies to build the hospital and to pay the daily workers. And then from an HR perspective, the first thing I ask for is the organogram or the staff chart, which gives a really clear picture of the activities. You can see how big the logistics department is, how big the med department is, and where the bulk of the HR will be, spent.
Great, thanks so much, Jessie. And how about for you, Paul? What's that first initial information that you want to know when you arrive?
I suppose it's really finding out where you fit in and what you do, and where the need you can provide. You have to remember, we arrive, we're international staff, we don't have all the answers. There's a team already there, and they're deeply experienced, and they understand the local context. National staff or the local staff will form the backbone of most of all the field hospitals that we set up. And it's also important to remember that those guys are actually living in the environment and in the context that we've been sent to. And they're often experts in providing the type of care in the low resource setting. So it's the information is, what do we have? And also, what do you do? It's amazing how if you walk in with open eyes, open ears, I've never left an assignment not having learned something or how to do something, without all the brass and toys that I have in my daily work. So for me, it's really finding out where can I fit in, and is there something that then I can provide or expand upon or help from that point of view. But it may just be being a safety net, that safety net of like just supporting them and allowing them to go about their work and just sitting and observing and helping when required. But yeah, it's really, the information is, who are you, what are we doing, and where can I help? And not going in, like I say, with the preconceived ideas or an ego, just that I'm there to help, point me in the right direction.
Great, thank you. And Paul, do you have any advice that you could give for other people for when they arrive? What would some of your advice be?
First and foremost, go back to my mantra of listening more than speaking, but it's all about building that rapport with the team that are on the ground. Short missions. So for me, anyway, in my role, so about 2 months. So you can imagine how many anaesthetists they've met in a year. So sometimes they can be a bit hesitant that you're going to come and then you're going to leave. So it's really building a rapport and approaching that environment with an inquisitive mind, rather than trying to dictate or state how things should be done. I really I approach it, and my advice would be, I'm here to learn as much as to give.
Thanks so much, Paul. And Jessie, how about you? Do you have any advice that you'd give for those out there thinking about going on assignment for when they first arrive?
So I think with your international team, I mean, it's important to recognise that you're going to be living and working together in quite an intense environment. So you want to put your best foot forward and really bring some treats to solidify that first impression. The Frenchies love cheese. Everybody else seems to love chocolate. So lots of chocolate, lots of cheese if you can. And like Paul said, like glean on the local staff. They have all the institutional knowledge. Like tax departments worldwide are diabolical, and so when it's 42 degrees and you're sitting outside, you want to have someone by your side that knows how to get to the good person to see. So yeah.
Thanks, Jessie. And if we fast forward now to the second half of your assignment, how did you change or adapt compared to when you first arrived? Jessie, I'd like to start with you, please.
yeah, like Paul said, don't rush in. So that first half of, or at least first few months of the assignment is sit back and try and understand why things are done the way they are. You know, they're pretty strict MSF guidelines in place for the HR policies and like our finance policies, just to make sure, you know, we're being transparent with donor money and all of that good stuff. But, you know, there'll be some deviations from policies within each project. And so, yeah, just understand, you know, why things might be done a certain way. It might be because there's no paper in the country. You literally can't print anything. So I'd say, yeah, just don't rush in to make changes in that first half. And then the second half, you can try and make small incremental changes to get in line with policy and best practice.
Thanks. And Paul, how was it for you in terms of, I know your assignments are much shorter, as we've talked about, but do you see quite a big difference between that first half and then what you can do, say, in the second half of when you're there?
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully in that first half, like I said, you fostered those relationships, gained some trust, and maybe assessed what is needed. Also, hopefully you've acclimatized to the weather, which is always important. In addition to the language, few phrases is always good. My Arabic is terrible, but you know, if you can converse with your colleagues a little bit along that line, which you learn as you get on in the first few weeks. You can also assess where you need it. I mean, if my one example in Nigeria, found out clinically they were very good, and they could cope with the simple cases that were done in theatres. So my role turned very much more to a logistic and setup kind of component. So it was setting up a second operative space, triage areas and things like that to kind of help the project in that space. You learn to work within that made me work with all the different parts of the MSF family that are there, figuring out what everybody else's role was doing in the different departments. But aside from clinically, the second half it's nice because the apprehension of being there, new environment, new clinical environment, new country has kind of eased a little bit. And you've also got to know the other people who are with you in the guest house. You have to remember you're surrounded by like-minded people doing different roles, but you will have had some great conversations overnight if you've had some downtime, you know, discussions, life stories. So you get to relax a little bit more, I feel, in the second half of things, as well as figuring out where your primary role and focus can be.
Thanks so much, Paul. Yeah, it's nice to hear how things really shift once you've kind of found your feet, yeah, and established yourself there. So between the two of you, you've worked across South Sudan, Bangladesh, Yemen, Ukraine, Gaza, different contexts within Africa and the Pacific. So that's obviously an incredible range of contexts. How different have those assignments been for you, Jessie?
Yeah, I think the major differences were driven by like the project activity and then by the security context. So in South Sudan and Bangladesh, we worked in field hospitals and IDP or refugee camps and had outreach activities, so going out into the community across the front line. Whereas in Gaza and Yemen and in Ukraine, we're more working in brick and mortar hospitals. And then, yeah, the security context really drives, you know, what you can do outside, what the availability is in the market. And yeah, so, and just the stage in which the project is at. So if we're opening a project, there'll be a lot of hiring. So in Bangladesh, we hired about 200 daily workers. In South Sudan, we're closing the project as the UN kind of got themselves established. We transferred our activities to them. And so we're settling 80 staff. So yeah, just changes in security context and activities and the life of the project.
Great, thanks, Jessie. And how about for you, Paul? How different have the assignments been for you?
Yeah, the buzzword is context. We talked about that before, and you have to think of it from my role. I think of it in terms of clinically. Your role would be very different depending on where you are. Purely obstetric project, you know, a pediatric project or a trauma project from that specific area. But also, I go as a specialist anaesthetist, but you're very much seen as a doctor first, anaesthetist second. So you need to be flexible in terms of what your role will be on projects in different projects. You could be manning the ICU as well. You could be reviewing general medical patients, or medically assessing other NGO staff, which was a novel thing in Sudan. And then the broader context really does change. Jesse's touched on a lot of the things there. A more established project, a bit more freedom, go through eateries, go to different markets. Definitely my first one in South Sudan was like that, which was nice. But then an emergency project, like earlier this year, I was in Sudan, and you're essentially confined to the compound, which sounds terrible, but it's manageable. You sleep about 50 meters away from the theater, and you really need to embrace compound life. So that was a different experience. But yeah, different, but already manageable, and all have their real positive components to them.
Thanks, Paul. And I want to follow up with one more question next. We talked about the differences. Obviously, there are so many differences between the contexts, but I'm also interested to hear, are there things that have remained consistent across every assignment that you've been on, Paul?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, dropping it down into both clinically wise, you meet the same equipment, which is really nice. So you don't have to relearn how to use the anesthetic machine, or you're aware of what drugs will be there as standard. There are a standard list of drugs that MSF will provide in an operating environment. So that kind of thing is constant, which is nice, makes it much easier to get on with the day job, as it were. But also, just as we touched on talking about the guest house, the food, the accommodation, maybe the vehicle logistics, that kind of model is similar, not identical, but very similar in every assignment that you will go on. So it's like a really reassuring, like a home from home. You come and go, I know how this works. So that kind of component in your brain is taken care of, and the more experience you get, those things you know are going to be there, you prepare yourself, and it's nice for the familiarity of that setup. So yeah, those things are constant and pleasant every time you go.
Thanks so much. And something else which I'd like to talk to now is about taking care of your own well-being when you're on assignment. This is something that is really important, and you touched on this earlier, Paul, as well. So this is something also that our audience is interested in hearing about. We did receive a couple of questions about breaks and time off and things like that. So we have one question from Chase, who asks, how much time off do you get? Could you answer this question, Jessie, and also share a little bit about what you did with your time off when you were not working?
So it depends on the project, but generally you'll get at least one day, if not the weekend, off. And during that time, I made sure I always bring a skipping rope, so I could do a wee bit of exercise regardless of whether around compound life or not. And a power bank. The generators tend to sometimes cut out, so it's really good to have a power bank, and then you can still listen to your audiobook or watch some TV series in your downtime. Sometimes we have days out with the local staff. They'll take us a tour around their favourite places to eat, depending on the security, of course. For leave, an emergency project, it's a weekend every 6 weeks, I believe, usually somewhere that's designated, and you just go and have time out from the project to kind of reset. And on longer assignments, it's generally 1 week every 3 months, and where you can go will depend on coordination. Usually they have a few options that were authorised. Like I said, we had Chef Patrick in South Sudan, and I got a wee bit tubby, so I actually was allowed to go to Tanzania, and I met my mum there, and we walked up Mount Kilimanjaro. So yeah, that was nice.
Oh, lovely. Lovely way to spend your downtime. That's great. And Paul, for you, you've worked in very different locations. How much does life outside work differ between the projects that you've been on?
Yeah, it can do. The shorter duration of project means there's no set leave component to it. Try and protect 1 day a week. So it's a 6-day week. But medicos, there wasn't a single day that you don't go into the hospital or do something, but downtime is there. When you do get a break, for me, it's a balance between lone time and socializing. And that's great that, you know, you try to give your own space where you can actually compartmentalize the day and deal things with that way. But there are social areas in the guest house, and it's really great to either have a rant or just discuss the day with your fellow people that are around there, in the informal briefings, I suppose, of meal times and the social situations. So it will change in context. So you can, and we have been away, we go to different eateries in the more established projects. In the other times we made our own entertainment. So quite good Wi-Fi in Sudan, so there'd be movie night. And there's always someone, often in projects I've gone to, that a lot of our Pakistan and Indian colleagues love to cook, which is great, and I fully embrace that. So barbecue would be sourced and cooked in different ways, normal traditional ways, which is really good, and normally a weekly activity. So there's always something to look forward to, irrespective of where you go. But yeah, it can be very, very different.
Wonderful to hear. And yeah, it's nice to hear that the food always tends to bring everyone together. Yeah, it's a definitely a common area. All right. And so now I want to talk a little bit about that that return home. So it's something that sometimes people can really underestimate, is that transition when you arrive back home after an assignment. So Paul, for you, especially after your first assignment, how did you adjust to being back home?
Yeah, I think looking back retrospectively, I think I found it, some parts of it a little bit tougher than I thought I would do. It wasn't so much coming back to the clinical environment, my normal day work, and it wasn't the contrast between what we had and the patients we're dealing with. You're met with questions. How was it? Tell me what you did. What was the best thing about it? What was the worst thing about it? And these questions all come from a good place. They're from colleagues, they're from friends. But I did find it really difficult to actually answer that initially. I would go around with a little prompt in my head about, I'd give a generic answer. Yeah, there you go, some good things, some bad things, you know. And looking back, that's just because it took time. The dust hadn't settled in my own mind, I believe. I think it does take time for you just to really absorb and compartmentalize what you've experienced. And that's a purely natural thing. It's got easier as I've gone on previous assignments, but allowing yourself time is something I would really stress when you come back, especially after your first time. Don't go straight back to work. Take a little bit of time, just let it settle, and don't be alarmed if you can't succinctly answer everybody's responses immediately. Let the experience settle in, and those conversations will come later on.
Thanks so much, Paul. That's really good advice. And Jessie, how about you? So especially looking back again to that very first assignment, how did you adjust when you came home?
Yeah, I think definitely I slept for about a week. And yeah, like Paul said, I think it's really important to take time, to absorb kind of, the change in the lifestyle and, everything that you've kind of witnessed. And yeah, I'd agree with Paul as well. It is like, I found it quite difficult when people ask me, oh, how was South Sudan, or, how was it over there? And you're like, oh, well, it was a civil war, so, quite grim sometimes. But I think like those conversations always kind of get easier the more you have them, and, you talk about, with like, social support, and kind of helps you form a good answer there. But yeah.
Great. Thanks so much, Jessie. And have you found, Jessie, that since you've been on multiple assignments with MSF, has your return home become easier with the more experience that you've gained, or is every transition just different no matter what?
I think more experience, and you can gauge kind of how deep the conversation is that you're wanting to have. Like, some people want to know but don't really want to know, so it's good to have like a surface level kind of generic answer, and then you can kind of delve more deeply if you want to. And the intensity of the project also for me really determined how quickly I bounced back. So yeah, Bangladesh and Gaza were really busy, and so like with South Sudan, I slept for basically a week, and then Ukraine wasn't so busy, so actually, you know, had a couple of nights in London with my friends and went to Glastonbury, and it was actually all good.
That sounds like a nice way to finish off your assignment, definitely. And Paul, before going on another assignment, how do you know when you're ready to do it?
I suppose you describe the itch returns, I suppose, is the best way to do it. There's a familiar spark and desire that rears its head. I'll find myself scrolling through, you know, MSF socials or looking at the global news in a broader sense. And my mind wanders to thoughts about the team on the ground rather than just the incident itself. And I find myself asking questions like, could I help there? Do they have a surgical project there? Is that something that, you know, I could do? And when that starts to happen, I know then that it's a time to reach out to the career manager and also to reach out to my boss at work and say, I may be disappearing for a couple of months sometime soon in the future.
Great, thanks, Paul. And how about for you, Jessie? How do you know? Do you get that itch feeling as well?
Yeah, definitely. When Paul said that, I was like, oh yes, I know that feeling. And yeah, I think, you know, it's important to keep in contact with my career manager. They know my skill set and what assignments might be a good match for me. And, you know, they'll let me know if I am up to date with all the policies and or if there's been changes in systems that I need to do online training for. So, you know, if I do want to go on assignment, then I'm ready to go. But yeah, and building up that goodwill with my current boss to let me have time off work as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to have a very understanding manager and colleagues as well. That's for sure. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much. So we will open the floor now for questions. And I do have colleagues helping on the live chat, and we'll do our very best to respond to a variety of questions in the time that we have left. We have received a high volume of pre-submitted questions, so we'll try to answer to those as well. If you are in the live chat right now, please ask about topics which we haven't already covered. We may not get to ever assess individual suitability or advise whether someone would be eligible to be recruited based on their specific background. So to do that, we would need a full application as we assess every application holistically. But if you do meet the requirements outlined on our website, we very much encourage you to submit an application, and we'd be very happy to assess it through our standard recruitment process. So I will kick off with a question now. The first question that we have is from Jill, and Jill asks, how do you maintain connections with family and friends while you're away? Jessie, could you share what your experience has been with this?
Yeah, so I knew that it was most likely the context, the situation I'd be in meant that the internet or comms might be a bit difficult. So before I left, I kind of sent out an email or put on Facebook, oh, does anybody want to know what I'm up to while I'm away? I'm thinking of sending out an email every 3 months just with an update. And then I kind of had that emailing list already compiled, and sounds quite self-indulgent, but I sent an email saying, what did Jessie do all day? And so I sent that out to the emailing list, and just with, the context, the security context of our project and the day-to-day tasks. So, you know, when I went to the bank, you know, did we have armed guards? No, because MSF, you know, doesn't have weapons. But, you know, just, all the mundane things that we'd get used to that would be interesting for people back home. So just sent out an email, every 3 months or so, and it was generally well received.
It's a wonderful way of keeping everyone in the loop without having to send 20 separate communications. Yeah, that's for sure. The next question that we have, this was a pre-submitted question. This one is from Dia, and Dia asks, how do active professionals combat vicarious trauma, fatigue and burnout. Paul, as a medical professional, would you be able to share your experience with this?
Yeah, I think it's, firstly, thank you for the question. I think it's a very important question to consider. And it's a true reality. I mean, we touched on before the fact that MSF has a presence in whichever country you're going to, there's going to be vulnerable people. There's going to be a potentially traumatic environment and lots of ethical and cultural considerations in that. I break it down really into, your pre-assignment, intra-assignment, and how you cope when you're home. Considering it, knowing it's going to happen, normalizing it and reshaping it to an occupational hazard allows you to think about it before you're actually there. Your briefings with MSF are going to give you some kind of idea. You're going to get psychosocial kind of briefings as well, and telling you how and where you can contact support. And talking to people who've been there is something that will be offered to you. It may be in the form where you could get a report of someone who's previously been, or they'll put you in touch with someone who's been in the context. And all of this can really help you get set in your mind of what you're going to expect. So being pre-prepared is a really good thing. And it can also think, when I'm in that situation and in assignment, how am I going to deal with that? What luxuries do I need to do? With me, I need coffee. I need coffee for any context. So my AeroPress is in the pack. And I know if I get my morning coffee between 6 and 7 a.m. when no one else is awake, I'm good. I'm in my Zen space and I'm good for the day, and I've compartmentalized it. It could be exercise when you're in assignment to try and help and compact. Yes, there's fatigue, but we know exercise is good for, your endorphins, feeling better, and it can really help with that. But when you're there, the biggest thing I will say, you're surrounded by a whole load of other people, and a whole load of other people who are in the environment that you're experiencing. My first assignment was South Sudan. My surgeon was Matteo. Well, don't know if I can share his name live. My surgeon was a German guy who I got on really well with. He's an experienced MSFer. I really leaned on him, and he really checked in on me. We're still good friends, chat regularly over WhatsApp about the different places that we are in the world. And that was a massive help. Not bottling things up, talking them out really helps with any stresses that you're having in these environments. And there are people more in the the overall organization that you can contact 24/7. There's a phone number that you can go to. There are different people on the ground, the PC, head of project, all these people are set up and places that you can report to, and they can assist you with that kind of thing when you're on assignment. And then coming home, we've talked about, don't go straight back to work, take some time, do everything else. But then you'll be offered other things depending on the context you went through. There was a psychologist I had to have a debrief, was offered and took a debrief with from an emergency context project. And also you'll be offered for peer support. That's really good. Talking to someone who's been there, who knows, is so much better to allow you to really deal with what you have experienced. I'm lucky I have a close friend and colleague who also is an MSFer, so that's a great thing. But down the official lines, they will offer you those kind of things to deal with. So be open to everything that's available to you. In assignment, don't bottle it up. It is there. The environments are challenging, but there's masses of support around.
Thank you so much, Paul. You've painted a very accurate picture of what's available within MSF and what you did personally. It's such an important question, and I'm so glad that we've had people asking about this. And yeah, I just want to echo really what Paul has said, that we really recognise that psychosocial support and wellbeing, it's something that needs very much ongoing support, and it's not just there for when you're struggling and when something's going wrong. And that's why we have that support available before you depart on assignment, during your assignment, and also afterwards once you return home. And so the MSF office, which is managing your project, has, as Paul mentioned, a dedicated psychosocial support person and unit. And here in Australia, we also have a psychosocial focal point who is a psychologist, as well as an employee assistance program, and that's also for confidential support. And we, as Paul said, we really encourage you to check in with your managers and peers, use that support that's available, and very much we don't see looking after yourself as something separate from the job. We see that as very much critical to enable you to continue to do the work that you do well and sustainably. Yeah. Thanks so much. Another question I'd like to throw to Jessie. This one is from Rory. And the question is, how often do you go on assignment and how much time do you usually have between assignments?
Hi, Rory. Thanks for your question. So I've been on 5 assignments since 2017. So I guess that's kind of depending on the length, like, every year or year and a half. And for me, I'm really lucky that I have a really good boss that is quite understanding, and the work that I do is more like project accounting. So I'm not strictly month end, got to be there every month. So I kind of am lucky in the fact that, I can finish up a bit of work and I can tell maybe, 2 months or a month out that I'll have a look on the MSF website and see if there's any positions that look like would suit my skill set, and I'll reach out to my career manager and she'll reach out to the project team, and there's a bit of back and forth, and then they say yes, you can go, or no, sorry, we've gone with someone else. But so I think for me it's like Paul said, when you get that itch and you're ready, you're fresh and you're ready to go, and it lines up with my work situation at home.
Great. Thanks, Jessie. And another question we have from GJR which is, does everyone experience homesickness on assignment? And how long does it usually last? Maybe Jessie, you can talk to that one.
Yeah, I mean, as the project admin, HR and admin, we often talk a lot with the expat staff, and people, I think one of the most important things with the MSF is that you can leave it at any time. So, just because you've said you've committed to 6 months or 9 months doesn't mean that you have to often stay 6 or 9 months. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of time and effort gone into matching you, so we want you to stay in the project, but you can leave at any time. But you're all in it together. You're always in a team. Would it be from 5 to 25 sometimes? So everybody's kind of there going through the same thing, and whether you're a first time person in the project or you've been on 5 projects, there's always going to be someone that can relate to you and what you're feeling, and and there's always that support that MSF offers if you really need to reach out.
Great, thanks so much, Jessie. And another question we have from Gilo. Gilo asks, what is the likelihood of having assignments back to back with some breaks in between and some notice before the next assignment? Do I need to unpack boxes at home or just take a break and keep my backpack ready? How has that been for you, Paul?
I do like the visual of just leaving these boxes and one day you'll get to them. For me, again, we've talked about how you need to have a relationship with your employer if you're in that kind of role. I have a very set role in day to day, but I have great colleagues and a great head of department who, if I give them enough notice, they can kind of like let me away. So back to back doesn't really happen for me. I'll have a break in between. I'm normally negotiated both at home and at work that 2 months in a certain period, maybe in an 8-month period, is my maximum. So plus I'm away for a short period of time. I go away and I come back. My boxes have been unpacked, so I can just move back into life with a bit of rest and recuperation. But it's very different for everyone. Career managers are not pushy. They say to me, you come to us and let us know. And they, like I said at the beginning, they've asked us, how much lead-in time do you need? So if there's an emergency need, my name is on a list, but they ask if you want to be on that list. And they will touch base with me. If not, they'll just wait for me to go, hey, I've got some time in October and through to December. Is there anything that I can do to help?
Great, thanks so much, Paul. And another question that we have from Chase, this one asks, can partners be assigned to the same project if they both have suitable profiles? For example, a doctor and a logistician. So this is something, it would not happen on a first assignment, but it is something that it may be considered later. But I would say that it's very uncommon, and it's usually only possible for very, very experienced staff, and very much depends again on the operational needs. So it would be quite rare, but it has happened in some cases. And another question that we have, this one's actually also from Chase. It asks, if you have a partner, how often can you take leave or have them come and visit? So I'll answer this one as well. For most locations, we don't allow visits from family or friends. However, as we mentioned earlier in the conversation, staff that go on assignment and work for MSF overseas are entitled to a week of leave every 3 months. And it's during this week of leave that, that offers a really good opportunity for you to catch up with your family. Perhaps you want to go on a holiday and meet up in a different location. That's often what people do. But yes, in terms of the accompanied positions, again, that's something that could be possible later in your career, depending on the operational context. Yeah, great, thanks. And I'm just looking here at some of the other questions that we've received. Oh yes, so there's a question here. This one asks, during a 6 to 12 month assignment, can staff take short leave to travel home for important events such as weddings or funerals? Jessie, do you have any experience with taking leave in a situation like this?
Yeah, I think when you're on a short-term assignment, you're usually on an emergency mission. So generally in those, it can be quite hard to get in and out of the country. So for example, when we were in Gaza, there was, like some days you'd be able to cross, go through the Rafah crossing, you'd have the all clear from both sides, and then it'd get cancelled at last minute. And we had some people waiting in Cairo to cross for like 2 weeks. So in those kind of emergency contexts where it is difficult to get in and out, and usually very so it makes it quite difficult to leave the project to go, home for a wedding or something like that. And yeah, so I would say generally short context, no, but with, a more stable project where the movements are much more able to be confirmed, then you'd probably be able to. Yeah. I'm not sure what your situation is, Paul, what your experience is.
I don't have any experiences of needing to come home for a wedding, or especially my own things. But again, it's all about communication and talk and having those talks, isn't it? I mean, if there's something going on at home, of course, talk to people, tell them what's going on, and go through. But you'll notice, and again, we reiterate, the buzzword is context. So it really does depend, like Jessie says. I was in Sudan, and it was a 3-day 4-wheel drive in from the Chad border. To get to where we were in West Darfur. So getting out isn't as easy as hailing an Uber sometimes. So yeah, they can have challenges, but yeah.
Thanks so much. And another question we have from Notes from the North is the username. This one I'd like to ask Jessie. The question is, are assignments any less intense for non-specialist roles? So I think, is this something that you could talk to?
Yeah, I think, like in different ways. So I mean, Paul will be able to speak to this as well, but for my experiences, the medical staff often have lower staffing rates and maybe experience more complex cases or higher rates of mortality than would be in their usual hospitals. And so psychologically it is a lot more intense for those guys, and they're often working, I think, as Paul mentioned, without his brass and shiny things. But for me, I found in my role that the HR is quite challenging. So you can be dealing with you and maybe you're a super duper admin assistant, maybe a cashier, and you could be processing payroll for daily staff and cash. And so you're having to count, and economies with hyperinflation, like bundles and bundles of cash for each daily worker, and it's got to be bang on, otherwise you'll have 50 people coming back and saying, oh, you short paid me by this amount, and you have to redo. So I found it quite intense, and the workload is very different from what I'd experience at home, and maybe but I mean, it's great. You're working with your team on site, and you've always got lots of support. And there's always this kind of push and pull between the logistics and the med teams about paperwork, and the admins wanting the paperwork. And those guys being, I'm busy saving lives, I'm not signing your paperwork. But it's all good natured, really. So yeah, I would say, but, and again, it depends on the project. Emergency projects are a lot busier. In Bangladesh, we hired, I think it was 200 people in, 2 months. Whereas if you're in a long-term project, you might only have, a month of hiring for malaria peak season or something like this.
Very, very interesting. Thanks so much, Jessie. And how about for you, Paul?
In terms of the non-medical staff intensity?
Yeah, well, actually more in terms of the medical side with you. Medical, yeah.
So I think we've touched on, how the on-calls and things going through. One point I did just want to make on that question while Jessie was speaking is we've used the word intense quite a lot. I think we should use the word manageable as well. We've been on multiple assignments. We don't want to paint a picture of going, oh my God, it's terrible, fatigue, and it takes me weeks to go. It is intense for a short period in the role that I do, but it is manageable. It is greatly rewarding. And like I said at the beginning when we started talking, I haven't left somewhere and not learned something both about the culture and also about my clinical specialty and how to deal with things. So it can be very intense for us. From a medical point of view, we can be in our own little bubble. We really can. And I apologize to my non-medical people when I'm on assignment with them. But the hospital doesn't function without the non-medical staff. The daily workers, the negotiations with the Ministry of Health, who were running many projects alongside with each other. Things do not happen unless the HR, the finance, your head of project, your logistics team, warehouse manager, and everybody who are negotiating through in country and doing this. So it really is a team dynamic. Sometimes you can think MSF is just a medical thing. It's really not. And I hope we've proved that today with the two of us speaking. So I think in assignment, we appreciate each other's work and appreciate that it can be stressful at times in many different ways, but each aspect is required for the main project to function how it needs to function for the environment that we're in.
Thank you so much, Paul. And that's a very lovely positive note for us to end the discussion on. So thank you so much. So I think today's conversation has definitely highlighted that while your roles are very, very different, they're certainly connected by the same purpose. So whether you are working in an operating theatre, managing people and finances, or supporting logistics behind the scenes, as you've just mentioned there, Paul, every role contributes to MSF's ability to provide medical care where it's needed most. So there are some useful links on the screen, which I hope you can see right now. I really encourage you to visit the Join Our Team page to find out more about working overseas with MSF, and also the essential criteria page. And this will show you the minimum requirements that apply to all roles. And there you'll also find the additional requirements for each specific role. So thank you very much, Paul and Jessie, for sharing your experiences so openly and honestly with us this evening. And thank you to everyone who has joined us online tonight.
Yes.